Hey guys, welcome back to Diablo 4. Today we'll talk about the endgame and some of the things you should be doing if you want to truly buff up your class to its max possible potential. How to get the Obducites, the Runes, the Ancestrals, even the Mythical uniques eventually, and truly become OP so that you can jump into higher and higher pit levels. So right from the very start, once you decided on a class, reached to level 60 with it and picked a build from the many guides that exist online, the next thing you'll be doing is a lot of tempering and masterworking as you progress in the game. You're going to do this a lot. It's going to follow you through your journey, pretty much through the entire end game, as you're not going to always get the perfect gear and the perfect rolls on it. And it's also going to be costly, which is why I'm going to show you the best farming methods in just a little bit. But in the meantime, tempering is the first thing you're going to be doing. This applies to extra affixes on your gear, and usually these affixes are game changing. When you're searching for builds online, don't just look at the items that you get, also pay attention to the affixes given by tempering, as usually they can be true build enablers. For example, in the case of the Quill Volley Spiritborn, it's extremely important to have a lot of barrier generation, resource generation, and extra resolve stacks, as that's what enables them to become OP with the Quill Volley build. But that's just one example. Now, you only have about 5 or 6 rerolls on these pieces of gear before you're pretty much locked out. And this means oftentimes you may even end up with a very good item, but a bad roll on at least one of the affixes. Well, here is where the Scroll of Restoration comes to save the day. They drop very often, by the way, from pit tiers. The higher the tier, the better, because the chance is going to be higher. And in my opinion, it's the best compared to any other source, including Hell Tides and even Nightmare Dungeons, but they can drop from anywhere else. However, these will reset the tempering charges. So what that means, it's going to reset the attempts that you have for each category, not the affixes you already applied on the item itself. Those will continue to persist. So if only one of the affixes was not the one that you needed, you only need to go ahead and reroll on that category, not on both of them. For some reason, some people still get that wrong. So in this case, I had an item with a good one roll, but the other roll was bad, so I only re-rolled that tempering category. In this case, I needed barrier generation. Now, the moment you have fully tempered an item, the next thing you're going to be doing is masterworking it, which is upgrading its stats. This is the next thing I recommend, and as soon as you reach level 60, you're going to want to immediately jump to 4 out of 8 masterworking levels on at least a few pieces, and I would argue 8 out of 8 immediately on your weapon, especially if your build depends on it. That's going to usually be enough to bring you to Torment tier 3, if not even 4, depending on the class. If you just have 4 out of 8 on all the legendary pieces and 8 out of 8 on the weapon, assuming that the build is good enough. And this is going to be for 2 reasons. On one side, because the first 4 levels are extremely inexpensive, they barely cost anything. And second of all, it's because every single level gives you a 5% bonus to all of the passive stats, to all of your affixes. Yes, this includes also the ones you applied via tempering. So dexterity, max life, crowd control, barrier generation, anything like that, they all get boosted. And besides this, every 4th level, so 4, 8, and then 12, if we're talking about Ancestrals, will gain an additional 25% to one of the random stats. So either of these could go, it's random, which is why it's part of RNG, so you're going to constantly push for new and new gear so that you can have it roll on the stat that you really need. Maybe you're very dependent on having a max number of resources or having an amount of regeneration so that you can power up a certain build. But again, that's class and build dependent. Now, all of this is going to cost Obducite. Maybe not so much for the first 4 levels, even 4 to 8 is quite manageable, but from Masterwork 8 to 12, this is when the cost truly skyrockets in terms of Obducite per level and per each individual item. So that's why this is one of the most important resources that you're going to want to farm in the end game all the time. And there are 3 best methods right now that you can do, including one that involves a bit of cheating, but it gives you literally thousands in just minutes. So the first 2 best methods are going to both be in the Infernal Hordes. I recommend the ones that only have 6 waves, as it takes much faster, and specifically we're going to use Ether to convert that to, in this case, Obducite. So if you go with the legit method, about 199 in this case Ether translates to almost 2000 Obducite from the cache of materials. In this case, from 2400 and a bit to 4300 and a bit, so a little bit over 1900 over there, which is not too shabby. However, there's one better way that you can do right here to convert 1 ether into 320 motes, and that is because the cache of materials will consume any number of motes you have remaining, even if you only have one left, to give you a minimal amount depending on the current difficulty that you are on. So that's why, to make this work, set the difficulty to Torment tier 4. This ensures minimal 320 Obducite per ether. Second of all, do not pick off the ether during the runs. Just leave it on the ground as you're going to pick it one by one to reopen the chest every single time. And third of all, turn off your pet, otherwise it will automatically collect the ether for you. Once you've done that, defeated the council and opened up the chest for the first time, you can then go back in the main room and you can now pick off the ether one by one and go back to the chest as it will reappear for you to open. And you can then rinse and repeat this for every single of the dozen of ether that you have laying on the ground, which will translate into thousands upon thousands of Obducite very quickly. Like I said, 320 per ether at Torment tier 4. Now, beyond infernal hordes, or once that trick gets fixed, because it will at some point, your other sources obviously going to be nightmare dungeons. It takes like 2-3 minutes at max to get about like 400-500. I think that the minimal guaranteed over here is about 250 if you finish the nightmare dungeon. But you will get dozens from enemies because they also drop them. Plus you have at least 1 or 2 events per nightmare dungeon that may give you another like 50 or so. So in total you can really finish it off with 400 plus very easily for a couple of minutes. This is when you're left without any other lockets to open up infernal hordes. Equally, make sure that you salvage and not sell the previously masterworked items that eventually got replaced by better ones. You can literally get hundreds if not thousands of Obducite back that you previously put in them. Now, we talked about all of these ways of becoming OP, but there's one more layer to it, which is via the runes added in the new expansion. And in many of the cases, these runes are even build defining. Like, for example, in the Quill Volley Spiritborn case, having Quay, which gives you that barrier generation from the Druid, is build defining because that's going to power up your damage even more via the overpowered build, and you really need that. But how do you farm for more runes? Well, there are a few methods that I found to be extremely efficient. So the most straightforward are going to be the Tributes of Harmony that you can use at the Undercity. These will guarantee rune drops at the end, about 4 of them at max attunement, which is very useful because you also get the rare versions of them, not just the magical ones. So a very good method, plus you even have chances for more Tributes of Harmony to drop once you finish that Undercity run. So for me, once I got like 5 or 6 of these, since then it's been feeding into itself and got like 3-4 extra Tributes of Harmony for one that I just used. Plus they also drop from pits and other levels, so definitely you can still go ahead and do it. But from this point on, there's another thing I recommend even more, especially for the legendary. Well, a couple of things. Another one is going to be doing Uber bosses. You really want to go ahead and farm the Uber bosses anyway because you really need the uniques from them. So Duriel and Dariel, even going for like the Ice Beast or anything that is for your class, but these 3 specifically and Varshan plus Gregoire are the most important for the Spiritborn. You really want to farm them because they have a very good chance at the higher grade runes in this case. So I got tons of legendaries. I can pretty much craft any mythical I want, and that's after going in and also using the party finder or playing with others so that we can rotate on the same Uber boss. It definitely helps. Plus you get all the uniques and even mythical gear later down the line. And this plus trading is going to help quite a bit. Now, besides this, we also have the rune crafting, which basically transforms runes into other runes. You use 3 to have a chance to get one of them that you may need. That is why the big mistake here would be to keep the ones that you're planning to use either on your gear or at crafting mythical items in your inventory when you're doing the crafting. Don't do that. Just put them in your stash and keep them there until you are planning to use them, because you may accidentally reforge them, which means losing them in the process. The ratio of conversion here is 3 to 1, so you consume 3 runes to get a random one on the other side, and in the case of magical and rare ones, there's an 85% chance it's going to be a rune of the same level, with a 15% chance of it being an upgrade. The only exception is legendary, which when you consume them, it's always going to give you a legendary. Now, as you progress in all of this content and pushing up higher torment tiers and pit levels, your next objective is to look out for ancestral items. These have a number of big advantages over normal legendary gear. On one side, they come with higher base stats. That is because they come with eye level 800 compared to the 750 that normal gear gets. Second of all, they also roll higher margins on the aspects that come naturally on them. So this means higher percentages, damage numbers, and bigger benefits. And the third and most important of them all is that they also roll with greater affixes, also known as GAs when you see them online, or basically these stars that you see next to the item's name. And all of these ancestrals can roll with anywhere between 1 all the way to 4 out of 4 GAs or greater affixes. These affixes have a 1.5x multiplier of their maximum roll compared to normal gear, which is what makes them so much stronger, so much more desirable, but also so much more rare. That is why you may even see them trading for billions and billions of gold. But that doesn't mean that you really need a full 4 out of 4 GA item out there. You can also go with one that has 1 greater affix, assuming that it's the actual affix that you need for your build. Like for example, in my case, I wanted one with max resource, so I got a few items that dropped with a GA on the max resource. So that was plenty enough for the content that I was planning to push on. Now, as far as getting ancestrals in the first place, there are a few things that I do in the end game just because I think that it shoots multiple birds with one stone. First of all, it's pit runs. Basically, going as high as possible in the pit, you're going to eventually get to higher tiers, and that's going to ensure getting more chances at loot. Of course, you're going to have to fight the boss at the end, and that's going to give you the drops. Plus, of course, you upgrade your glyphs, becoming stronger in the process. Higher pit levels also gives you a lot of obols, like you get 200-300 per run, so it easily reaches the cap, and this means you can gamble away even more at the obol vendor, and with a double chance from that seasonal blessings, you're going to have more chances at ancestrals too. Again, fully RNG, but it is what it is. Followed of course by the Undercity, and specifically using the tributes of Radiance. The legendary ones will guarantee getting those ancestral legendaries, though you're going to have a limited number of these legendary tributes in the first place. That's why I kind of don't like them, but if you manage to gather a few, it can be quite helpful. And besides this, I also talked about bartering. There's also that option. You will get thousands of points anyway if you max all the characters to 10, and then from that point on you get infinite levels anyway, so you get even more points to buy items from the barter vendor. And finally, there's obviously going to be the obol vendor, like I talked about before. The double chance for double gear will give you so many legendaries. It's bound to eventually also give you some ancestrals, but again, it's all RNG, so I don't really want to sugarcoat it. But now that we're at the pinnacle of damage, pushing high pit tiers, maybe even going towards 80 plus, closing to 100, maybe there's one more thing that you may be missing to make your build complete. Many of these builds actually require at least one of these items, and those are the mythical uniques. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, I will not sugarcoat it. It will take a little bit of while to get these. You may even have bad RNG. There's one straight far away that you can get specifically the mythical item that you need, and I'm going to show it to you in this video. And that's going to involve, on one side, finishing the seasonal journey and basically finishing up all the levels right here, including the last one. You don't need to finish all the objective as long as you just finish the minimal requirement for each individual level. In this case, you're going to get one guaranteed resplendent spark from the last chapter right here at the end from one of the chests inside. The other one you're going to get by finishing off your first Uber boss. Now, it can be Uber Lilith from my understanding, but it can also be any other Uber boss. And it should drop another resplendent spark for the 2 out of 2 that you need to craft your first mythical item. However, keep in mind that there's a bug going on right now, so if you finished an Uber boss and didn't get a resplendent spark from it, it's because that bug may still be in effect. At least it was earlier last week. So let me know down below if it is in the comments. For everybody else, including myself, I got that from my first Uber boss, and I was able to craft my item from this point on. But don't worry, there's going to be another method in just a little bit. Now, once you've got 2 out of 2 sparks, you can either go ahead at the blacksmith and just craft a mythical unique cache, which is going to give you a random mythical unique once you open it. I do not recommend this as your first craft, as it may even give you something that you don't really need currently. So just keep those 2 and instead bring them at the jeweler. Now for this, you can go ahead and craft a specific mythical item that you really need. Like for example, in my case, it was the Tyrael Might, but you also need 3 additional types of runes on top of the 2 sparks. So that's going to be 6 out of 6 for each of these 3 categories on top. But like I said, if you do the farming that I told you about in the rune category, you should have these eventually. Plus between that and the trading you can do with other players, you will eventually get the 6 out of 6 as you play in Torment tier 4. So you can now go ahead and craft specifically the item that you really need and not waste your time on the ones that you don't. Now, besides this, another thing that you can do is to just farm Uber bosses. And if you just gather around with like 3-4 other players, you can rotate all of your summoning boss materials. And instead of only doing that boss like 5 times, you now do it like 20 times, because every single one of you may have 5 or more summoning rounds in them. So go ahead, do them. This is going to give you more chances at eventually seeing some mythicals drop. And even if you don't get the one that you need, you can just salvage that mythical, get the spark out of it, and then use that to eventually craft the actual one that you need, either for the cache or for the specific one at the jeweler. Oh, and before I finish things off, yeah, even the Obol vendor has a chance to give you a mythical. Yes, that can happen. That is why in the previous video I recommended to have the Urn of Curiosities in the Seasonal Blessings, so that you have that extra 40% chance to get a second item when you purchase items from the vendor itself. So that can actually be quite lucrative, and you get all of those extra items, but it can also be extra ancestrals, uniques, and so on. And yeah, that's pretty much it with the video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.